Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Easy English Room podcast. I'm Henry, speaking to you from London, and as always, I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Emma, right here with me. Hi, Emma. How are you doing today?
Hi, Henry. I'm doing great, thank you. And hello to all our lovely listeners out there. It's honestly such a pleasure to have you back with us again. We've prepared something really exciting and meaningful for today's episode. But before we dive into the main topic, we'd genuinely like to pause for a moment and show our appreciation to every single one of you listening.
Yes, absolutely. To be honest, the amount of support and kindness we've been receiving from all around the world has been truly overwhelming, in the best possible way. We read your comments, we see your messages, and we hear your stories. Your encouraging words really motivate us, and in fact, they mean far more to us than you might imagine.
That's so true. And interestingly, seeing how much you enjoyed the podcast gives us even more energy to keep creating valuable content for you. On top of that, we'd like to give a special shout out to those of you who have been sharing our episodes with your friends, your families, and even on social media platforms. In a way, you're not just learning English, you're helping others learn as well, simply by spreading the word.
Exactly. And that's something we deeply appreciate. It's amazing to see how this community is growing day by day. Thank you for being such an important part of the Easy English Room podcast family. We truly couldn't do this without you. Now then, let's keep this positive energy going. Today, we're going to explore the importance of listening skills, and more importantly, how you can actively practice and improve them. As you know, listening is such a key part of learning any new language.
That's right. In fact, it's often the very first skill we begin to develop when learning a language. However, at the same time, it's also a skill that many learners don't focus on enough. So today, we're going to take a closer look at why listening is so essential and how you can take small, simple steps every single day to improve. Actually, Henry, let me ask you something. When was the last time you listened to someone speaking English and didn't understand every single word, yet you still managed to understand the main idea?
That's a really interesting question. Honestly, that happens to me quite often. Just the other day, for example, I was having a conversation with a friend from London who speaks extremely fast. I definitely missed a few words here and there. However, even though I didn't catch every detail, I was still able to understand the overall message of what he was saying.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of listening. It's not really about understanding every single word perfectly. Instead, it's more about catching the context and identifying the key ideas. That's a skill that develops gradually over time, and it becomes stronger with practice.
I completely agree. I think many of our listeners can relate to that experience. There's something really satisfying about realizing that you can follow a conversation even if you don't fully understand every little detail. It gives you confidence and shows that you're making progress.
Yes, definitely. And today, we're going to show you how you can build on that ability and become even more confident in your listening skills, especially when things start to feel difficult or confusing. Oh, and before we continue, just a quick reminder, there's a free PDF available with all the key points from today's episode, so make sure to check the description below. It's really helpful if you want to follow along more closely or review everything later at your own pace.
Great point. All right, let's begin by talking about why listening skills are so important in the first place. Emma, would you like to start us off?
Of course. So, to put it simply, listening is the foundation of language learning. If you think about it, when you were a baby, the very first thing you did was listen. You didn't start by speaking or writing, you simply listened to the people around you. And interestingly enough, the same idea applies when learning English as a second language.
That's absolutely true. Listening helps us understand how words are pronounced, how sentences are formed, and even how the rhythm and flow of the language work. In addition to that, listening also supports other skills like speaking, reading, and writing. In a way, it's like the base of a pyramid. Everything else is built on top of it.
Exactly. And if you think about your daily life, listening is everywhere. You're constantly listening, whether you're at work, having a conversation with friends, or even watching TV shows or films. So improving your listening skills isn't just helpful, it's absolutely essential for real-life communication.
Yes, and I believe one of the biggest challenges learners face is understanding native speakers. People from London, for instance, often speak quite quickly. They also use slang, idioms, and informal expressions, which can make everything sound a bit overwhelming. almost like a blur.
That's very true, and I've experienced that myself. But here's the good news. The more you listen, the easier it becomes. Gradually, you start to recognize patterns, understand different accents, and even pick up on slang expressions. It's really all about consistent practice and exposure.
Exactly. And that leads us to a very important concept, the difference between hearing and listening.
Yes, this is a crucial point. We all hear sounds every day without even thinking about it. However, active listening is something completely different. When you're actively listening, you're fully focused. You're paying attention, trying to understand the meaning, and remembering what's being said.
That's a great explanation. It's really about being present in the moment. I remember when I was learning Spanish, I had to train myself to listen actively. Otherwise, the words would just pass by without any real understanding.
Exactly. It's so easy to let words slip by, especially when you're tired or distracted. However, if you make a conscious effort to focus, active listening can significantly improve your understanding of context. It also helps you respond more naturally in conversations.
And that's incredibly important in real-life situations. When you listen carefully, you can respond more accurately, build stronger relationships, and communicate more effectively, whether it's at work or in social settings. Being a good listener is always an advantage.
That's very true. However, at the same time, we should acknowledge that listening isn't always easy. Learners face quite a few challenges along the way. So, Henry, in your opinion, what's one of the most difficult aspects for English learners?
I'd say accent and speed are definitely at the top of the list. Native speakers, especially in places like London, can speak very quickly, which makes it hard to keep up. On top of that, accents can vary a lot depending on the region, which adds another layer of difficulty.
That's a very good point. And of course, we can't forget about slang and idioms. Native speakers love using informal expressions, and sometimes these phrases don't make any sense if you translate them word for word.
Exactly, like when someone says, "It's raining cats and dogs." If you take that literally, it sounds completely strange.
Yes, exactly. And then there's another challenge, background noise. For instance, if you're in a busy cafe or a crowded street in London, it can be even harder to focus on what someone is saying. But don't worry, because in the next part, we're going to share some practical and effective tips to help you improve your listening skills, especially when things start to feel difficult or confusing.
All right, then let's dive into the really useful part, practical ways to improve your listening skills. To begin with, one effective approach is to start with slower and clearer audio materials. For instance, podcasts or audiobooks that are specifically created for learners can make a huge difference, especially in the early stages.
That's a great starting point. In fact, you can easily find plenty of videos on YouTube or beginner-friendly podcasts where speakers talk at a slower pace and pronounce words more clearly. This, in turn, helps you build confidence step by step. Another helpful strategy is using subtitles at the beginning. For example, you could watch a film or a TV series with English subtitles on, and then little by little try to turn them off as your understanding improves.
I really like that idea. Actually, watching the same video more than once can be incredibly beneficial as well. The first time, you might just catch the general idea. Then, on the second or even third viewing, you'll begin to notice details you completely missed before. It's almost like your brain starts filling in the gaps naturally.
That's so true. And here's one of my personal favorite tips. Focus on key words. In other words, even if you don't understand every single word, try to listen for the most important ones. These key words often give you enough information to understand the overall meaning of what's being said.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, moving on, let's talk about some useful resources you can use to practice listening regularly. Emma, what would you personally recommend as a go-to option?
Well, to be honest, I almost always recommend podcasts designed for learners. There are so many excellent ones available nowadays, where people speak clearly and at a comfortable pace. This makes them ideal not only for beginners, but also for intermediate learners who want to improve gradually.
I completely agree with that. Podcasts are fantastic because they allow you to immerse yourself in English in a very flexible way. For example, you can listen while commuting around London, doing household chores, or even just relaxing at home. It's a simple way to add more English into your daily routine.
Exactly. And on top of that, audiobooks are another brilliant option. What's great about them is that you can follow a story while listening, which keeps you engaged. Narrators usually speak clearly and with good pronunciation, so it's easier to follow along. You could start with simpler books and then gradually move on to more challenging ones as your confidence grows.
That's a fantastic suggestion. And for those who enjoy entertainment, watching TV shows or films in English is another fun and effective method. At first, it's better to choose content with simple dialogue. Then, as you improve, you can challenge yourself with more complex stories and faster conversations.
That's a great way to approach it. And as we mentioned earlier, subtitles can really help at the beginning. However, over time, it's important to slowly remove them so you can focus more on actually listening rather than reading.
Right. Now let's move on to some interactive exercises you can try. One technique that's incredibly effective is called shadowing. Emma, have you tried this method before?
Yes, I have, and it's surprisingly powerful. Basically, you listen to someone speaking and then immediately repeat what they say. It might feel a bit challenging at first, but it really helps improve your pronunciation, rhythm, and overall fluency.
Exactly. And it's important not to worry about being perfect in the beginning. The goal is simply to train your ears and get used to the natural flow of the language.
Another exercise that works really well is dictation. For instance, you can listen to a short audio clip, pause it, and then write down what you hear. This helps you pay closer attention to details and improves your accuracy over time.
That's a very effective method. Also, after listening to something like a podcast or a video, you can try summarizing it in your own words. This is a great way to check how much you actually understood and to reinforce the main ideas in your mind.
Now, let's talk about something that many learners find challenging: accents. Listening to different English accents can be quite difficult at first, but it's extremely important, especially if you plan to travel or work internationally.
I completely agree. There are so many variations. British accents from London, American, Australian, and even regional accents within each country. The key is to expose yourself to as many different accents as possible.
That's a really good point. At the same time, it's important not to feel discouraged if you don't understand everything right away. Each accent has its own rhythm and style, so it naturally takes time to get used to them.
A fun way to practice this is by watching interviews or videos featuring people from different parts of the world. You could also listen to news channels from various countries to hear how English is spoken in different contexts.
Now, here's something very important to keep in mind. Listening and speaking are closely connected. In other words, the more you listen, the better your speaking skills will become.
That's absolutely true. One effective way to improve both skills at the same time is through conversation practice. For example, you can find a language partner or a tutor and have regular conversations where you focus on both understanding and responding.
And even if you don't have someone to practice with, you can still improve by imitating native speakers. Listen carefully to how they pronounce phrases and try repeating them yourself. This helps with both pronunciation and fluency.
I actually enjoy doing that while watching films or TV shows. I just repeat what the characters say. It might feel a bit silly sometimes, but it really helps you sound more natural over time.
That's true, and honestly, it's a very effective technique. Now, something we really want to emphasize is the importance of patience and consistency. Improving your listening skills doesn't happen overnight. It takes time and regular practice.
Yes, it's very easy to feel frustrated when you don't understand everything immediately, but that's completely normal. The key is to keep going and trust the process.
Exactly. And it's also important to celebrate small achievements along the way. For example, maybe today you understood a new word or recognized a phrase you hadn't noticed before. Those small moments are actually signs of real progress.
That's a great way to look at it. Every little step forward counts, and if you stay consistent, you'll definitely see improvement over time.
Finally, let's talk about real-life listening situations. These can be quite challenging, but at the same time, they're incredibly rewarding.
Yes, real-life conversations are where everything comes together. You need to listen carefully, understand quickly, and respond naturally. It can feel a bit intimidating at first, but with practice, it becomes much easier.
And don't forget, it's completely okay to ask for clarification. If you don't understand something, you can simply say, "Sorry, could you repeat that?" Or "What does that mean?" Most people will be happy to help.
That's right. Asking questions not only helps you learn, but also shows that you're actively engaged in the conversation.
Also, don't avoid real-world listening. Instead, challenge yourself with different situations. Listen to podcasts, the radio, or even have casual conversations with friends. It's all about stepping outside your comfort zone and gaining confidence.
Absolutely.
That's a really good point, Emma.
Well, Henry, before we wrap things up, let's pass things over to Laura for our vocabulary spotlight. She's going to explain some key words, phrases, and expressions related to today's discussion.
That's right. Lara will break everything down clearly and help you leave this episode with new vocabulary that you can both understand while listening to English and use confidently in your everyday situations. Hello, Lara, and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Henry and Emma, and hello, everyone. Let's go through some important words and phrases related to today's topic. I'll explain their meanings and give you simple examples to help you not only use them in real conversations, but also recognize and understand them when you hear them in spoken English. Comprehension. Comprehension refers to your ability to understand something, especially spoken or written language. For example, listening comprehension improves when you practice regularly with different types of audio. Interpret. To interpret means to understand or explain the meaning of something, especially when it's not immediately clear. For instance, you don't need to understand every word, just try to interpret the speaker's main message. Nuance. Nuance is a small but important difference in meaning, tone, or expression. For example, advanced learners begin to notice subtle nuances in how native speakers express ideas. Articulation. Articulation refers to how clearly someone pronounces words when speaking. For instance, good articulation makes it easier for listeners to follow what you're saying. Intonation. Intonation is the rise and fall of your voice when you speak, and it often shows emotion or intention. For example, understanding intonation can help you recognize whether someone is asking a question or making a statement. Engage. To engage means to actively involve yourself or pay full attention to something. For instance, it's important to engage fully when listening rather than just hearing words pass by. Retention. Retention is the ability to remember what you have heard or learned. For example, taking notes can improve your retention of key information from a podcast. Process. To process means to think about and understand information. For instance, your brain needs time to process new vocabulary when listening to fast speech. Exposure. Exposure means being in contact with something regularly so you become familiar with it. For example, regular exposure to English audio will naturally improve your listening skills. Fluency. Fluency is the ability to speak or understand a language smoothly and naturally. For instance, listening practice plays a big role in developing overall fluency. And there you go. Those are some advanced and very useful expressions that can really help you talk about listening skills more confidently. Try to notice them when you're listening to English, and even better, try to use them in your own sentences.
And with that, we've come to the end of today's episode. Until next time, happy learning, and we'll see you again very soon.
Take care, everyone, and keep going. You're doing great.
And remember, your progress doesn't stop here. If you'd like to keep improving your English, feel free to check out the next video or explore some of the other lessons we've carefully selected for you. They'll help you continue building your skills step by step.
Thank you so much, Lara. That was incredibly helpful, as always. I really like how you explained everything so clearly and simply. In a way, you made those words feel much easier to understand and remember, especially for learners who might be hearing them for the first time.
Yes, definitely. We truly appreciate it. Step by step, building your vocabulary can make a huge difference. Not only does it help you speak more confidently, but it also makes it much easier to understand English when you're listening, which is exactly what we've been focusing on today.
That's a great point. And looking back at everything we've covered, it's quite impressive. We started by talking about why listening skills are so important, and then we moved on to practical exercises and useful tips. So, in a sense, you now have a complete set of tools to start improving your listening in a more structured and effective way.
That's true. And what's really nice is that these strategies are simple enough to include in your daily routine. On top of that, don't forget that we've prepared a free PDF for you. It includes all the key ideas and tips from today's episode, so you can review everything whenever you like. You'll find it in the description below.
Exactly. It's a great way to go back over what you've learned and make sure you're actually applying these techniques in real life. In fact, reviewing regularly can really help you stay consistent and see progress over time.
That makes a lot of sense. And before we wrap up, we just want to say a big thank you to all of you for joining us today. We really hope this episode gave you useful insights and practical ideas. More importantly, we'd love to hear about your progress, especially as you continue working on your listening skills. Yes, absolutely. Keep practicing regularly, stay patient with yourself, and don't forget, improvement takes time, but it definitely happens. Every small step you take brings you closer to your goals.
Exactly. In a way, learning a language is a journey, not a race. So keep moving forward, keep challenging yourself, and most importantly, enjoy the process.
All right then, that brings us to the end of today's episode. Until next time, happy learning, and we'll see you again very soon.
Take care, everyone, and keep going. You're doing great.
And remember, your progress doesn't stop here. If you'd like to keep improving your English, feel free to check out the next video or explore some of the other lessons we've carefully selected for you. They'll help you continue building your skills step by step.